Hello and welcome to Veeam Industry Insights. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Jeff Reichard from Veeam's product strategy team, and once again, I will be hosting today's Industry Insights. Before I introduce the two panelists I'll be interviewing today, a quick reminder, as always, please join us in the chat from whatever platform you're viewing today's live stream from. Let us know where you're joining from, and we will periodically drop out to our global map and let everyone know where we have different folks joining from to watch today's live stream. Now, we have a really good talk about regulatory compliance, particularly around DORA, which is coming into effect shortly in the EU. I am joined today by two security and compliance experts. One is Veeam's own Andre Troskie. He is Veeam's Field Chief Information Security Officer for EMEA. We're also joined today by Dane Knudsen, who is the Director of Global Alliances for Security and Resiliency at Veeam's alliance partner Kyndryl, the huge global systems integrator. Dane, why don't you kick things off and introduce yourself to our viewers today?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Welcome from, as Jeff said, wherever you are in the world. Dane Knudsen, Director of Global Alliances within the Security and Resilience practice here at Kyndryl, based out of Miami, Florida, but originally from Australia, in case you hadn't figured that one out. Really excited to be here. I think the change in landscape around regulation is going to have a big impact on all of us. And we at Kyndryl are really focused around that and how we solve our customers' challenges with the help of Veeam and their product suite to actually get them to the space where they are going to be compliant now and into the future.
Fantastic. Andre, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks who are on?
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, guys. Andre Troskie, the EMEA Field CISO for Veeam Software. I've spent the last 25 years helping customers improve their security and resilience posture via IT audit, IT risk management, and cybersecurity consulting. And I joined Veeam Software earlier this year as I realized I could add more value with a company that's a thought leader in the data protection space. Look forward to the chat.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andre. So, Dane, let's expand on this just a little bit. Obviously, you've been at Kyndryl for a while. You've been active in the space around cyber resiliency and compliance for a while. How has your experience driven you to want to engage with this and to help organizations with it?
Yeah, great question, Jeff. I think the fact is that I actually came out of this from a operational perspective. So looking at it back in the day when we would test our backup strategy by recovering in real time to today when that is not anywhere near suitable for meeting our regulatory requirements or even keeping the business operating in the time of disaster. So now it is how can we come together and bring change, innovation, and modernization into organizations' infrastructure, whether they're cloud, on-prem, or hybrid. The whole thing is very dynamic and constantly changing.
Yep, absolutely. Andre, let me have you expand on that as well. I know you've got a passion for this. Share with our viewers today a little bit about what your journey here has been.
Well, look, I started my career as an IT auditor, so I was looking at control environments and helping organizations identify where they're going wrong and how to mature those environments. So, you know, it's consulting is one thing, but we really have to help organizations with the people, the processes, and the technology to drive them forward and make sure that we have a resilient world. I think we're looking at geopolitical tensions and increased risks around the world. So we need to do more. And I think we stand ready to help our customers do that.
Fantastic. So let's dig in. Today's topic is DORA. Dane, for those of our viewers who are not aware, could you share with them the DORA regulatory framework and what it's going to be doing for businesses in the EU and globally when it comes into effect?
Yeah, absolutely. So DORA is the Digital Operations Resiliency Act out of the EU, specifically targeting the financial services businesses within the EU. The central bank did a tabletop exercise a little while ago, and as a result of that, 70% of the financial institutions in the EU unfortunately failed. So there was a real focus around how do we ensure that we're protecting our financial interest, our financial assets, and our customers and company reputation into the future. So DORA was born out of that. So it's putting the legislation in place that has, for the first time, some serious teeth in it around making sure that organizations understand the risk and are mitigating that risk. So now, come January of 2025, DORA becomes real legislation, enforceable legislation. So we have a window in which we can help our customers with the help of Veeam, ensuring that we are getting those customers to a position where they will pass audits and limit exposure as much as possible.
Fantastic. Let me ask you to unpack that just a little bit. When you say that the Digital Operations Resiliency Act will increase the enforcement, sort of increase the penalties and put some teeth in it, what does that look like, and what is DORA replacing that's currently in effect? I mean, we're not starting with a blank slate in terms of regulation. How is DORA different?
So DORA is very different. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Andre. That's fine.
No, I was just saying that from a DORA perspective, we're entering a period of comply or else, rather than comply or explain. This really reminds me of when the US introduced the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002, after some high-profile financial scandals, WorldCom, Enron, and the like. And Section 4 of that act made management responsible for a system of internal control. And this makes me feel very much similar to DORA, where we really putting the onus on management to make sure that resiliency is top of mind and make sure that we implement those correct controls. I mean, Dan, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what we're now seeing is that resiliency is a key component at the C-suite level. And this is bringing it to the front of those conversations where the legislation, where the regulation is pinned by significant fines and potentially jail time for those that don't comply. And I can see that that is going to be a trend that is replicated around the world. And so it doesn't matter, we've got people sitting here from all over the world. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting in India, Australia, America. If you're doing business in the EU, you have to be compliant. There is no getting around because I have my headquarters somewhere else. We've still got to be compliant. Right.
So in that respect, to cite an example, it's a lot like GDPR, which drove privacy practices globally, because any organization doing business, if they had EU data subjects, had to be compliant with GDPR, and it's going to be the same for this. That's very interesting. Andre, let's tighten the focus just a little bit for a minute. You and I are both at Veeam. Obviously, DORA is going to affect the day-to-day operations of financial services institutions, in particular around how they protect data, around their general IT security, and around their resilience practices. Can you unpack that a little bit and talk about what the actual changes on the ground are likely to be?
I always start with an old Chinese proverb. It says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. We need to get stuck in as soon as we possibly can. But fortunately, most financial institutions are not starting from scratch. So that's there at least. But the scope has been extended to such an extent that there might be organizations that are not as mature as the most mature banks that are out there from a governance perspective or from a resilience perspective. So we really need to make sure that previous risk assessments or whatever the case may be is updated with the latest digital transformations that are taking place within organizations. And that means that operational teams would have to get more strict on their cybersecurity governance. How do we get IT and security and resilience to work together with C-suite to make sure that we've got a cohesive plan? We'll have to enhance cybersecurity protocols, so continuous monitoring will be the norm. We'll have to have near real-time insight in what's happening on the ground so that we can react to that. We will have to have better vulnerability management systems so that those patches that can take 6 months to deploy get deployed sooner, But I think especially two key elements is that incident reporting and response will now require dedicated teams. It would be IT, security, legal, management, the executives all have to work together to make sure this plan is executable to get you back to where you need to be on your worst day, you know. And then together with that, I think a big difference or a big change is also that we now have to worry about third-party risk management. So all those vendor assessments that we have to get done, we have to look at our SLAs with our service partners, and you know we have to get the contracts updated to make sure that DORA is integrated into those plans as well. Not to mention, you know, encryption, access controls, training. I won't go through that, all those in detail now, but I think, you know, as Dan said earlier, that technical debt would need to be serviced. We will need to get the security technologies in place and the upgrades to IT infrastructures to make this not just adequate, but to make it effective as well. And I think from a cost perspective, that's going to be key.
So let me unpack, Andre, a little bit of that, and then we'll lead into the next question that I have for Dane. You mentioned we're going to have to go to continuous monitoring and continuous response. Now, as an ex-auditor, I think what you're highlighting is the difference between perhaps older 10 or 20 years ago audit checkbox compliance behavior versus the compliance behavior that DORA is going to require, which is really going to be affecting your day-to-day operations. Is that what you're pointing out?
Indeed. You know, we will need to have our finger on the pulse of what's happening within the network, but you know, how do we identify that something is anomalous? You know, so we'll need to drill this, we'll need to test this, we'll need to do tabletop exercises, but we'll also need to dive a little bit deeper to make sure that we can act when it is appropriate to do so.
Yeah, and not just as an IT problem, but cross-functionally, corporate communications, legal, risk management, et cetera. Yep.
Right.
That makes a ton of sense. So Dane, let's lead into that with you. Speaking specifically about risk management, if you look at the way that the landscape is going to change when DORA comes into effect, and we're not very far off on that, you mentioned less than a year, what risk management strategies do you expect to see changing in order for financial services organizations that are subject to DORA? What do you see them changing? What specific changes do you see coming down the line?
I think a lot more of that visibility that we talked about earlier. I think that the continuous improvement and thinking about, you know, from a Kyndryl perspective, we talk about minimum viable company. Where are those golden assets within your data framework that require the application to be available? Recovering the data is well and good, but unless the application is there to support it, you don't have a real business. So looking at it down, where is the data residing? What are the applications that support that data or leverage that data into the customers? And more importantly, what does the minimum viable company look like? So having that continuous monitoring and continuous testing and securing of those assets, I think will change the field dramatically. And I know that where we have a hybrid environment where customers are running, you know, workloads on-prem and in the cloud, or, you know, even in the cloud solely, I think there is going to be a lot more testing and ensuring that the recoverability of this data is actually going to happen.
Fantastic. Okay, we have a question from the audience, and Andre, I'll let you start with it, but I think it ties into what we were just asking about. Singh on LinkedIn said, can DORA be called an extension to operational risk control? Andre, I'll let you start with that.
I think it could. It's risk management has been in place for a long time. So I think DORA is just driving us as a rising tide lifts all ships. You know, so we need to make sure that all the organizations involved in the financial services industry will be able to respond, will be able to recover in an adequate period. You know, because we don't want these attacks and outages to affect the citizens of the EU. We've seen, you know, if a point of sale terminal goes down for half an hour, it's chaos. You know, we can't afford these things to happen. So we want the trust to remain in the system, and therefore we have to make sure that operational risk is elevated, and DORA is part of that. I mean, I
Very
guess
good.
NIS2 is also the sister directive that talks to the other industries within the market. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Very good. Very good. I'm going to jump out. Felicia, could we take a look at the map now? I think that we have folks who have joined us now, in addition to Florida here in the United States, Texas, Connecticut, Ohio. We also have Andre in the Netherlands, and we have been joined in here by folks in Greenland and in Spain as well. So thank you to everyone who has dialed in and joined us on today's call. Let's continue. I want to, Dane, we just talked about changes to risk management strategies. Andre, data protection, we've discussed. Let's talk briefly now about disaster recovery. If an organization maybe is still doing their disaster recovery plan old school, and they're going to be subject to DORA, or as you point out, to NIS2 going forward, what specific changes are we going to see around disaster recovery preparation that folks will be implementing?
Look, I think we need to address some things that DORA has brought up. So standardized reporting framework. So we want uniform reporting criteria consistent across the financial sector. You know, that's going to be a toughie for a lot of organizations that are not as mature as maybe, you know, the biggest banks in the world, whatever the case may be. And also to get to those defined reporting timelines. You know, we're talking 24 to 72 hours for initial notification. So we need to identify the incident, we need to organize ourselves, we need to protect ourselves, and then start that reporting framework going forward. You know, mandatory reporting to authorities, you know, all these things will be quite difficult to do if we don't have a mature incident response disaster recovery plan in place. And I think, you know, and then for detailed reporting requirements, we look at incident reports, you know, that are now dictated by the DORA Act. So we have to provide those continuous updates as the outage is dealt with. You know, so there's a lot to be done, you know, to make sure that there's an efficient response. Excuse me.
That has been driving behavior, the mandatory incident reporting with short timelines of 24 to 72 hours for different aspects of the incident. We've already seen in some high-profile ransomware attacks here in the United States, MGM as an example, the SEC requirements for 24-hour and 72-hour reporting of material incidents drove a lot of reporting around that. And one of the things that I've read, and I'd be interested to find out, Dane, what you think about this, I've read experts saying that kind of mandatory incident reporting should drive less ransomware payments because it takes away maybe the last hopes that an organization might have had that they can sort of sweep the attack under the rug. Is that, Dane, what your team is finding when they talk to organizations about this?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the real drive for this is around company reputation as well. So as these things become public and as they are spoken about in the media, we're seeing a lot of our customers wanting to make sure they're not the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or any of those things. So it's definitely driving a change in behavior. It's driving a greater understanding of what resiliency means. And I think that, looking back on my career in this industry, which was 30 odd years, resiliency was never spoken about. It was recovery of the data. We didn't have to deal with the ransomware we are dealing with now, the way that organizations are needing to vault their data in air gap situations. We kind of had it back then because the tapes were taken offsite, but it's a whole new world now. And I think that's definitely driving a change in the way the organizations around the world are protecting and ensuring their reputation is kept intact.
Perfect. Well, Dane, that's an ideal lead into the next question that I had for you, sir. Obviously, Kyndryl has a giant practice focused on enterprise security and enterprise resiliency. You've helped a lot of organizations working to meet those challenges generally, and you're working quite a bit with organizations specifically around DORA compliance. We have a slide that kind of describes the way that your consulting engagements work when you work with organizations on these kind of challenges. If we could put that up, and Dane, could you walk our viewers through the way that Kyndryl specifically helps with meeting these resiliency challenges and DORA compliance?
Yeah, absolutely, love to. So our mantra has always been around modernize, innovate, and secure our customers' infrastructure and their data, making sure that they do have that minimum viable company that can be recovered in the time of need. So we break it down into a very distinct and architected framework around how we do this. So the Cyber Regulation Readiness Program, which sits at the top of this across all of Kyndryl, can then be broken down into child components. So the Cyber Resilience Maturity Assessment, where are you on that cyber resiliency roadmap? Where do you think you are versus where you really are? Talking about cyber incident recovery, understanding where those data gems are, where those gold nuggets of data are, where the applications are that you need to have operational to give you your minimum viable company. So we work with our customers to understand the journey that they're on, and also do consult around that tech debt that we keep talking about. Unfortunately, it's a reality. There are a lot of organizations out there that come January of 2025, their current systems are not going to be able to cope with DORA regulations. So we're working hand in glove with Veeam to help them understand where that tech debt is, what needs to be supplemented, and do that from a trusted advisor perspective, and be able to push the right solution in for their needs.
That sounds perfect, and I'll say two things about that. First off, I've completely stolen the whole idea of minimum viable company. I love that phrase and concept that Kyndryl uses when you talk about resiliency services. It's so valuable and so easy for people to understand. The other thing that I'll point out, and I'd be interested in what you've seen, Andre, I'll let you comment on this, but because having a compliant incident response plan and a compliant incident response team involves getting folks who may not normally have worked together in the past to work together, I think there's probably a lot of value for organizations having an outside helper like Kyndryl come in to consult on this. Andre, you're not from Kyndryl, you're from Veeam, and obviously you've had an independent career focused on security and compliance. Have you seen that kind of outside consulting help add value in that area of bringing orgs together that way?
Most definitely, Jeff. I think, the first thing you want to do is conduct that gap analysis and to understand your current state maturity. And I think, getting somebody like Kyndryl to come and help is just their view of what they've seen in other organizations. When I was an auditor, every 2 weeks you were a different organization, so you really got to see how different people were doing it, and the skills and the technologies that you need to get this right. So you want to understand the current maturity. Kyndryl can help with that. They can also define your desired future state maturity and show you what leading best practice looks like. And I think that helps people make decisions a lot faster than having to make mistakes or staring at their technology debt and not being able to move forward with that. So how do we develop that compliance roadmap? How do we prioritize based on severity? That's where organizations like ours can definitely help customers move forward at speed.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Let me read a follow-up question that we have from Himanshu. The question is, thanks for your answer. I have a follow-up. Some financial institutions still rely on a very old tech stack for risk reporting. You all have both just mentioned that, so clearly technical debt is an issue. Will DORA force them to upgrade to the latest tech stack, for example, migrating to cloud from on-prem? What are your thoughts on this? I'll ask that question of both of you. We have time enough for that. Dane, do you want to start?
Yeah, look, I think the legislation will absolutely force organizations to modernize the way they handle resiliency. This one is going to be very touchy. I love it. But backup is dead. Long live resiliency. Just taking a backup is no longer a route to ensure your ability to recover from an outage, regardless of where it comes from. So having a holistic approach to resiliency is key. And I think that we're going to see that escalate and expedite that process really quickly. I don't necessarily know it's going to move everything to the cloud. I think that, hybrid might be a viable solution, but it's going to depend on the organization and where their risk profile sits.
Very good. Andre, what are your thoughts?
I fully agree with what Dane said, but I think, from a risk management perspective, we still have to identify, assess, mitigate, monitor. Those things will continue happening. But when we move to new technologies, that also brings challenges. We'll have to reskill some of our workforce to be able to deal with that. So the skill shortage is something that's going to haunt us, perhaps. So there's a lot to be done. How do we get governance and oversight into potentially siloed environments where IT don't speak to security and security doesn't speak to the business? We need to solve all those problems together with our customers to make sure we have the best outcomes.
Yep. It's for sure that organizations need help around that. We see that around the skills shortage. We see that around the demand for Kyndryl services, because organizations recognize they need help with unpacking this and getting it sorted out. I will add one quick point for you, Himanshu. While cloud can be an advantage for security, and indeed Darktrace actually just published some stats on this, that 74% of organizations migrating to cloud services migrate there in part because they want to enhance their security posture. But I'll also note that in Veeam's ransomware trends research from 2023, and join us at Veeam on just next week if you want to see about our research from this year, one of the surprises that a lot of organizations found is that just moving data up to the cloud did not protect it from being attacked, for example, in ransomware attacks. As Andre just noted, you need to secure stuff when it moves up. Even if security is a big hope that you're having for moving to the cloud, you can't forget it, because it's liable to be attacked exactly the same as the rest of your IT estate if a threat actor gets into the environment. So important thing to remember. Okay, we're wrapping up. We're reaching the bottom of the half hour here. Let me ask you first, Dane. If you have advice for anyone who is navigating this, who's partway through the process or beginning the process, what would your advice be for them prior to DORA going into effect in January of next year?
So I think the crucial thing here is, it's one thing to read the legislation, it's another thing to understand and interpret it into a real world situation. So working with organizations like Kyndryl, we can help you understand and implement what the legislation is actually intended to achieve, not necessarily what the letter of the law is. So getting that outside advice, getting that assurance from an organization like ours, where we've been doing this for a long time, will make a big difference in that journey and help understand where that tech debt is and how it can be reduced significantly going forward.
Awesome. Andre, same question. What would your advice be?
Look, I think for me, the most the most important element is to get executive sponsorship and involvement. I think if we're going on this journey, we need to make sure that we're going to get the support from the C-suite to get that done. And then I'd say we need to appoint a dedicated team for transition, not just IT people, consultants, legal, all the people that are involved in a recovery element or preparing for disaster needs to take it into consideration. And then I think, lastly, collaborate with industry peers, get the information you need. We're here to assist, and I think that's the only way that we can get this done, is by doing it together.
Perfect. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. For our viewers, please join us on Thursday, May 30th. Rick Vanover will have our regular noon slot of Veeam Tech Bites. And this will be the first Veeam on today. It will be Rick plus Object First, the Veeam Alliance partner. Then Industry Insights and Tech Bites will return from Veeam on next week. Next Tuesday, you can join me and Jason Buffington for a session from Veeam on outages and all things data protection. And right at the end, I will just wrap up and say, if it is still a possibility for you to attend Veeam on live, it's still not too late to sign up. You can sign up to attend in person and get a $300 discount on your sign up by using the promo Final Call 300. thank you so much for joining us today. Andre, Dane, thank you all for your time. Been a pleasure having you all on.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.